is a pressing issue for this race?
I hear that it's important, but it's maybe fourth or fifth on the list of issues.
Republicans like Donald Trump, conservatives, they have made it into a political issue instead of a private healthcare issue.
You want to adopt as much sort of the most pronounced mannerisms as possible and, find the tone that the opposing candidate is likely to use.
Hello, I'm Ed O'Keefe, CBS News in Washington. Welcome to America Decides, the first ever debate between a sitting American president and a former American president is happening this week, you may have heard. Sources tell CBS News President Biden is engaging in both formal and informal prep sessions up at Camp David. And later this hour, we'll speak to a man who's played Donald Trump in mock debates with the current president. Their meeting in Atlanta is only 2 days away, but several other key political showdowns are happening today across the nation, and we're going to start there. Statewide Senate and House primaries are taking place today in Colorado and Utah. Runoff elections are also happening down in South Carolina, and we are closely monitoring a key House race in the Empire State of New York. Democratic Congressman Jamal Bowman facing a fierce challenge from Westchester County Executive George Latimer. The race already making history as the most expensive congressional primary of all time. The two contenders have spent nearly $25 million on political advertising. That is million with an M. Our Scott McFarland is in New Rochelle, New York. Scott, good to see you. This primary has earned intense focus from Democrats and those who closely track New York and national politics. But step back and explain to the rest of the country, what is it about this contest that folks who live elsewhere should care about? Why does this one matter?
Ed, in the same week as the first presidential debate, it's easy for people to lose track of some of these down-ballot races, especially the down-ballot primaries. But let me tell you who didn't overlook this race. Many, many, many donors. Yeah, $25 million spent just on a primary election to get a nomination for a U.S. House seat. It's because this has become a bit of a political proxy war over the war in Gaza. The two-term incumbent, the progressive Jamal Bowman of the Bronx, has taken a distinctive position criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu, calling him a maniac, and criticizing the war, calling it equivalent to a genocide. His challenger is George Latimer, the Westchester County executive who used to be a state legislator here. He is a household name for a lot of folks in Westchester County, where he leads a major American county. He has been fueled by millions of dollars in donations from political action committees aligned with Jewish American interests. We asked George Latimer as he campaigned today and met with voters what he makes of this focus in this race on Israel.
The amount of money that's being spent in this race is indicative of what happens on a national level when even one House seat becomes important in the macro chess game that's played. And, the incumbent who's complained a lot about that, he had a major financial advantage 2 years ago when he ran for the seat because he, too, has independent expenditures.
So how is Jamal Bowman responding to all this? He has said George Latimer is beholden to big donors. And the line he's used throughout this day, and really throughout the last week of this campaign, is it's money versus many. That George Latimer is the interest of money, but that there are many supporters for Jamal Bowman. We'll find out if that part's true when the polls close at 9 p.m. here in New York. And
Scott, you've touched on this, but the fact that the war between Israel and Hamas has been such a big factor in this, not only in terms of the rhetoric and the debates that these two have had, but the amount of money spent. The AIPAC-affiliated group United Democracy Project spent nearly $15 million boosting Latimer's campaign in response to Bowman's criticism of the war. To what extent has that factored into the actual choices of the voters participating today? Do we have any sense of that?
And George Latimer will tell you it's not the thing he hears most about when he campaigns. He says he hears about the things we've been talking about: inflation, the border, pocketbook issues. That notwithstanding, the donations are coming from interests that are very much aligned with sides on this debate over the war in Gaza. So it's somewhat unavoidable, though George Latimer says when you retail politics here, you do hear about other things. Jamal Bowman had a lengthy rally we attended yesterday in Mount Vernon, New York. Israel did not come up. But in the ad war, which New Yorkers are growing quite tired of, it saturates the airwaves. And part of the issue here, Ed, is this $25 million, this bonkers amount of money being spent on this election. You got to account for one thing. Not only does it seem to be a proxy war over a bigger political issue, but also it's a uniquely expensive part of America in which to campaign. This is the boardwalk and Park Place of the electoral map.
Good way of putting it. It is the #1 TV market, the New York market, so that's why it's so expensive. Real quick, this is but one contest. Is there anything more that can be gleaned from this race about the state of the Democratic Party in New York or across the country?
Oh, absolutely. You see other progressives here campaigning with Jamal Bowman. That includes Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's on the ballot in her own primary nearby. She's on the air, by the way, too, but marshaling her time and energies to help Jamal Bowman. There seems to be this sense that Jamal Bowman's test case could impact other progressives in future election cycles. If he gets whopped here, it could, if he gets walloped, it really could lead to other races, other primaries down the road for his political allies.
All right, we shall see. Scott McFarland there in lovely New Rochelle, New York, in Westchester County, New York. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you soon. And I know you'll be tracking things tonight. In other news, today marked the third and final day of a hearing centered on whether special counsel Jack Smith should be removed from Donald Trump's classified documents case down in Florida. CBS's Katrina Kaufman's been following this from inside the courtroom.
This afternoon, Judge Cannon held a hearing where she heard arguments from Trump's attorney about the validity of the search warrant that was used for when the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago and found the boxes of classified documents that are at the heart of this case. And we actually just got new pictures of those boxes from Jack Smith last night. They show how these classified documents were mixed in with other personal keepsakes of Trump's, with clothing and thank you notes and photographs, even Christmas ornaments. But what was being discussed in court today is that Trump's attorneys say that the language that was used to obtain that warrant wasn't specific enough and that it was overly broad. They also say that the search itself was too broad, that FBI agents were allowed to go anywhere on the property. They even searched the room of Trump's son and of his wife, which really seemed to be a point of contention for them. However, Judge Eileen Cannon pushed back on Trump's attorney, Emil Bovee. She repeatedly asked him what language he actually thought was missing and why it would have mattered legally. She pointed out that paperwork is something that can be found anywhere and that Trump has a large property. By the end of the hearing, it seemed like she was probably going to side with the prosecution on this one. She said that she had trouble seeing what was missing. Towards the end, this hearing also got a bit contentious. Trump's attorney was starting to bring up issues related to other motions, and the prosecution's attorney, David Harback, accused him of hijacking the hearing. At the end, Judge Cannon abruptly ended things, and that was the end of today in that courtroom. Ed?
Katrina Kaufman, thank you. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has agreed to plead guilty to violating the Espionage Act. He's expected to appear in a U.S. federal courtroom on the Northern Mariana Islands this week. Assange will not spend any time in U.S. custody as part of this agreement. That's because he'll receive credit for the approximately 5 years he spent in a British prison fighting extradition. A federal grand jury indicted him in 2019 for illegally obtaining classified information and posting it online. Pennsylvania was key to Joe Biden's 2020 victory, and it's just as critical this time around. Coming up, we speak with one of the Pennsylvania Democratic congressmen the president sees and speaks with most often about what it will take to win back the Keystone State. And don't forget, you should join myself and my colleagues at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. in the West on Thursday for coverage of presidential debate right here on CBS News 24/7. This program will kick off coverage with a special edition of America Decides live from the Spin Room in Atlanta at our usual time. Thank you for streaming CBS News. Americans under 30 rank the economy as a top factor in who they will vote for this fall. A new CBS poll finds it's a major factor for 78% of younger voters. Ahead of Thursday's debate, the Biden campaign has a new ad airing in Pennsylvania and Georgia, hitting Donald Trump on economic issues.
Donald Trump loves to attack Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Joe Biden.
Because he's focused on revenge, and he has no plan to help the middle class. He'd just give more tax cuts to the wealthy. Joe Biden is working every day to make your life more affordable. He capped the cost of insulin, lowered healthcare costs, and made big corporations pay their fair share.
Let's bring in Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle, who represents Pennsylvania's 2nd Congressional District, which is better known as a big part of Philadelphia. Congressman, good to have you with us. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a poll since about April giving President Biden any sense of an edge over Donald Trump in your home state. What does the president have to do to turn things around in Pennsylvania to make sure he wins again?
Well, it's good to be with you. Pennsylvania is, of course, yet again the biggest battleground state in the nation, as it was in 2016 and 2020. The state was decided by 1 point or under in both of those elections, and I think it'll be razor thin again. I'm looking forward to the debate on Thursday night because you have the opportunity to look at a president who was governing, who has led this nation through the recovery from COVID, versus a president who was only known for chaos and confusion. I look forward to that contrast, and I am confident that President Biden will win Pennsylvania and win re-election this November.
We know that debate prep is underway up at Camp David, that there have been some mock debates held and will be held going up to before he leaves for Georgia. If the president called you during one of the breaks and said, Congressman, what do I have to do? What do I need to do to win over your constituents? What would you tell him?
Well, I would welcome that call, but I'm not expecting it. What I would tell the president, as I've had the opportunity to tell him previously when we've traveled back home to Pennsylvania together, to affirmatively make the record that Joe Biden is on the side of middle-class America. It's yet again Scranton versus Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump is just for the richest 1% of Americans. When Trump was in office, what did he do? He attempted to take away health care from 30 million Americans by stripping away the Affordable Care Act. And then, after that failed attempt, he pushed through his tax cuts, 83% of which went to the richest 1%. Compare that to the Biden Democratic agenda, which is about middle-class economics. I look forward to most of the rest of this campaign being looked at through that frame.
Part of the reason why we wanted to have you here is because, as you mentioned, you're someone who sees him pretty frequently when he's out in public. How many times has he been to your district since he became president? I mean, we're pushing at least 10 times, right?
No, it's actually double that. I'm proud to say that besides Delaware, of course, we've had Joe Biden in my district in southeastern Pennsylvania more than any other congressional district in the country. So it shows you how much this president understands and cares about his birth state, whether it's Scranton or Philadelphia or out to Pittsburgh and Erie and all points in between. He knows Pennsylvania. It was a great advantage when I-95 collapsed in my district right around this time last year. He was on the phone with me within 24 hours talking about how we were going to fix it in record speed, and that's exactly what the White House achieved.
Well, it doesn't hurt that you're a swing district inside a swing state, inside a big city that he loves. So yeah, that didn't hurt either.
I will take it all, whatever it takes. But it's great to have a president who I can honestly say knows our city, Philadelphia, and our state more than any other president in my lifetime.
Well, and there's another reason we wanted to have you here is because you've introduced a fun idea ahead of July 4th. You're proposing that the House and Senate hold a commemorative joint session of Congress in your hometown of Philadelphia on Thursday, July 2nd, 2026, to honor the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence at a little building there in Philadelphia. First of all, kudos for planning ahead, but how would this work?
Yeah, so since 1800, since the nation's capital was taken away from Philadelphia and moved to Washington, D.C., only twice in American history has Congress met outside Washington, D.C. The most recent occasion was 2002 in New York on the one-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The other occasion was at Independence Hall in 1987 to commemorate the bicentennial of the Constitution. So this would be a third such special meeting. It would again be in Independence Hall, which I'm honored and fortunate to get to represent in my congressional district. And I frankly have modeled my legislation off of the 1987 precedent, the only other time this happened in Philadelphia. I think it would be a special convening. It would commemorate our 250th birthday as a nation, the semi-quincentennial, but it would also be, I believe, a unifying moment at this period in which we are, let's face it, more divided than perhaps any point since the 1850s.
You said it there, semi-quincentennial, that's how you pronounce it?
I have spent the last several years practicing how to say semi-quincentennial just to get ready for this moment.
Because it's going to be a pretty big one for your district. Congressman Boyle, we'll track the progress of that bill. If it happens, we'll see you in Philadelphia in 2026. We'll see you before that, though. We appreciate it. Thanks for spending some time with us. A CBS News investigation reveals that ChatGPT gives incorrect and incomplete answers to some questions about voting in battleground states. The investigation asked the AI system practical questions about voting in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The bot gave some correct answers and at times corrected previously incorrect answers. A spokesperson for ChatGPT's parent company responded to the investigation saying, quote, preventing artificial intelligence from being used to interfere in this year's elections is a priority for OpenAI. Vice President Kamala Harris is keeping her focus on abortion rights and targeting it especially at Latino voters, how it's playing in the critical battleground of Arizona. Stay with us. You're streaming America Decides.
This is where we are, and 40% of Latinas in reproductive age live in a state with an abortion ban.
Welcome back to America Decides. Vice President Kamala Harris speaking there Monday in the battleground state of Arizona about access to abortion services. It's a top issue of concern, and you heard her there speak specifically about Latinas. How do they feel about this issue? Well, let's ask CBS's Nydia Cavazos, who joins us now from Phoenix. Nydia, good to see you. What are you hearing?
Ed, when it comes to Latino voters here in the state of Arizona, we see and we hear that they have a very mixed variety of opinions and views when it comes to the issue of abortion. On one hand, we have many Latinos and especially young Latino voters who are saying that they're going to be voting in November, heading to the voting booth specifically to vote to ensure that they're going to continue to have access to abortion. And they say they're also mobilizing their friends and their families to do so, to go out and vote. And on the other hand, we also have the Latino voters who say that they're going to vote based off of what they consider to be more traditional Latino values. They're conservative, but they also say that their religion stops them from ever voting for any sort of politician or any sort of ballot measure that provides some sort of abortion access. Let's take a listen.
Well, I have been on birth control since I was 14. Access to reproductive health care, including contraception, abortion, all of that has always been top of mind for me growing up in a time where it's healthcare is a political issue. Republicans like Donald Trump, conservatives, they've made it into a political issue instead of a private healthcare issue that's personal.
Stop preying on women. Stop trying to use women as a tool for your political gain. Because with the blood of the babies, if you want to gain political power, it's not going to be good for you. You shouldn't prey on women, especially Hispanic women, on Hispanic babies. It's very unfair.
Now, Ed, this is only a very small sample of the many different opinions and views, political views that we come across on the campaign trail, and now especially here in Arizona. But it's also important to note that we're going to be focusing on covering the Latino vote, especially in these battleground states, because Latinos are a part of a voting group that will be decisive in determining the outcome of the election come November 2024. If we go back to 2020, President Biden won Arizona with the help of Latinos, and he won the state by fewer than 11,000 votes. So this means that the winner in November of 2024 will be decided on the margins.
It sure will. Nydia Cavazos, thank you for bringing us that. As you said, a small sampling, but an important one. We appreciate it. In other news, the Surgeon General has declared gun violence a public health crisis. Dr. Vivek Murthy is calling on the country to ban automatic rifles and introduce universal background checks. His advisory is driven by the growing number of injuries and deaths involving firearms. The nation's top doctor spoke about his concerns earlier on CBS Mornings.
This is an issue that's infiltrated the psyche of America. People are scared in many communities I visit around the country to do normal things like go to school or the grocery store or work, and they're worried about the risk to their life.
In recent months, Murthy has published similar warnings about a range of issues, including social media use and loneliness. A major question lingers as the presidential debate nears. Who will Donald Trump pick as his running mate? Well, we'll discuss who that could be with our panel coming up next. You are streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump is leaving us all in suspense about who he may pick as his running mate. He says he's already privately decided who the pick will be. And the presumptive Republican nominee claims that person will attend the debate on Thursday night. Stephanie Lai and Robert Costa join us now. Stephanie's a national politics reporter for Bloomberg News. Robert, of course, CBS's chief election and campaign correspondent. Good to see both of you. Bob, let's start with you. What is the latest on the Veep stakes and where exactly his head may be in picking a running mate?
Ed, great to be with you. Based on my conversations with sources close to former President Trump, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum is in a strong position to be Trump's running mate, along with Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Of course, Trump could make a different decision in the coming days. We all remember covering Trump's decision in 2016. It veered from Mike Pence to Chris Christie to Newt Gingrich, then back to Mike Pence. Other names at the final few days of that decision were bandied about. Trump is hearing a lot of names even tonight, I'm told, by people who have spoken with him. At the same time, Burgum and Vance keep coming up again and again. Trump has a comfort level with both of them, and it's really a generational difference there. Burgum, 67 years old. J.D. Vance, under 40 years old. It's about what kind of ticket he wants to present to the country and also who he has a real rapport with. Burgum is someone who comes from the business world, was a software executive in North Dakota for years, sold his company to Microsoft 2 decades ago. Trump might want a business person alongside of him, I'm told.
The governor, spoke with Fox about the ongoing VP search. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
This is his decision alone. If he's made up his mind, he hasn't told anyone. And I think it's terrific. He's got a lot of good choices. And I think when he makes a choice, he'll choose someone who can help him govern. He'll choose someone that can help advance the Make America Great Again agenda forward.
And Stephanie, we see the governor there speaking with Kayleigh McEnany, Trump's former White House press secretary, now a Fox News host. There's also now set to be a new bake-off starting tomorrow morning on that same channel when some of these contenders and their spouses are going to sit for interviews with that morning show that they air through Monday. How important is that kind of an exchange to Trump as he makes his decision in the closing hours?
I can imagine that would be incredibly important, right? To see the interactions and the relationships that the potential vice president and his spouse could play a very significant role. Not only does this candidate have to have a good rapport with Trump, but presumably the vice presidential spouse also has a good relationship with who would presumably be the First Lady, Melania Trump. Yeah. And so seeing that relationship could definitely color how he makes this decision.
I mean, TV's and how you do on TV is so important to him, so makes sense. The judge overseeing the New York case, the business case, I just lost my train of thought there for a second, has partially lifted the gag order on the former president ahead of the debate. Is there any sense that this frees him up to talk about things that he's been desperately seeking to speak about?
It doesn't really prevent Trump from talking about the case. The gag order has prevented him from talking about the jury, talking about witnesses in the case. And so he has been blocked in many respects from talking about Michael Cohen, right, who has been his foil with the New York case, the criminal case, looking at those hush money payments to Stormy Daniels years ago. At the same time, Trump has always articulated his belief that he is a candidate for federal office. He doesn't really need to abide by gag orders. His lawyer, Todd Blanche, has always said he's going to follow the court's order. Now that that trial is over, it could come up at the debate on Thursday night. But this is not a significant development for Trump because he has always tested the bounds of what he can say.
And as we get ready for the debate, Stephanie, there's a new Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll out that puts the former president ahead of the current president. Our polling from several months ago suggested much the same. Do we have any sense of what the two campaigns are doing down in Georgia this week to build support while this is going on in their backyard? So
both campaigns have already announced a handful of events. So the DNC has already hosted an event today. They also will hold a press conference tomorrow in Georgia. And at the same time, Trump's campaign has also set up a couple events with top surrogates like Representative Wesley Hunt, Representative Byron Donalds, and they're really targeting black voters in the state. Because I think one of the most crucial parts about Georgia is just being able to chip away at Biden's lead in terms of black voters. So if they can convince voters to support Trump, that could be a significant win for the campaign.
And we've seen the expectation setting going on with his team publicly this week. They've been saying all sorts of things about what the current president's been up to. One of the things this afternoon I thought was most striking, and it's a fair point, that Jason Miller said, that President Biden, has had to essentially take himself off the public stage and out of public focus for the last week in order to prepare for this, sort of arguing that if he does well, it's only because we haven't seen him out and about for the last several days, whereas Trump has been out there doing that. I mean, that's an interesting argument to be making, suggesting that the way Trump's preparing perhaps is better than the current president.
Among my top Democratic sources, the view is that the Biden campaign is not a traditional campaign. It doesn't need to follow any sort of playbook or guidelines or even norms from campaigns past. It's more of a campaign, I'm told, of signature moments: the State of the Union address, the debate, the convention, maybe another debate in the fall if it ever happens, and then the election itself. That it's not a rose garden strategy as Jimmy Carter and others used to talk about when they were running as incumbents, but it's about picking his spots where he knows the audience is going to be extremely high and making sure he meets the mark, comes across as a strong contender, at least in the eyes of his allies, and all the other things, hitting different swing states. He has people who are his allies, his surrogates, who are appearing across the country, trying to rally core constituencies, but his presence is not necessary in the eyes of Democrats. He's not seen by Democrats as a movement figure. Donald Trump's a movement figure who has gone to minor league hockey arenas for nearly a decade to rally his people. Biden doesn't have people. He has a constituency across the Democratic Party that he needs to make sure is there, but it doesn't need to be stirred by excitement again and again.
There are a high number of minor league hockey arenas he's been to, come to think of it. You're right. Tentpole strategy is essentially what Biden's up to. If you do well in State of the Union, if you do well on debate night, if you do well on the second debate night, if you
because
win
there's
on
a belief
election
among
night.
Democrats that most voters are not paying attention to the so-called campaign.
got a
They're paying
point.
attention to the presidency at key moments.
Yeah. Robert Costa, Stephanie Lai, thank you for being here as we look ahead to Thursday and the big debate. Thank you both for joining us.
I ran because of you. I ran because of Barack Obama, because you did a poor job.
President Biden and Donald Trump have just 2 days until the first presidential debate. Next, we talk to the man who's played Donald Trump in President Biden's debate prep. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. We're just 2 days away from what could be the biggest turning point in the 2024 presidential race, the debate between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. Debates are supposed to represent the best that campaigns have to offer the voting public, and debates can show a candidate's poise under pressure, the quality of their preparation, and their nimbleness in responding to the unexpected. Those aren't my words. They're the words of our next guest, Bob Bauer, the author of a new book, The Unraveling, Reflections on Politics Without Ethics and Democracy in Crisis. Bauer has served as a top legal advisor and attorney for the Democratic Party since the late 1970s. Most notably, he was chief counsel to both of Barack Obama's presidential campaigns and served as White House counsel. And he was more recently a senior advisor to the Biden campaign and helped with vice presidential selection. Bob, thank you so much for joining us during what I know is a busy week for you. We'll kind of get into that, but we won't entirely get into it, because among the many things you've done for your political clients through the years is serve as, in essence, your client's opponent during preparations for debate. And you played the role of Al Gore for Bill Bradley during the 2000 Democratic primary. You played the role of Bernie Sanders, then Donald Trump during Joe Biden's 2020 primary and general election debate prep sessions. Why is having a stand-in for a candidate's opponent necessary and important? And how do you prepare to play the opponent in that kind of a prep session?
Well, thank you. The goal of the candidate preparing for the debate is to prepare, frankly, for the debate most likely to confront him or her. That is to say, to understand what that experience most likely will be like, what the opposing candidate will come in likely to emphasize, the tone that opposing candidate is likely to use, the style with which that argument will be made. So the whole purpose of debate prep is to approximate the experience of the upcoming debate. And it's important to do that, to warm up to that experience in that way. And an important part of that is having someone play the role of the opposing candidate.
And you write in your new book about how you prepared, for example, in 2020 to play Donald Trump. You said you watched hours of tape of the 45th president as a businessman, as a 2016 candidate, and then in office, you read transcripts of his extemporaneous remarks. You got into the role as it requires. You didn't dress the part. You didn't necessarily learn to mimic his voice, but you had to get pretty close to what he'd conceivably say, right, in order to prepare Biden for that debate.
That's correct. You're trying to be helpful to the candidate that you're preparing, and so you're not auditioning for a role as an impressionist or satirist or Saturday Night Live guest. You want to adopt as much of sort of the most pronounced mannerisms as possible and, find the tone that the opposing candidate is likely to use. And then, of course, most importantly, absorb and be able to present the material the way the opposing candidate is likely to present it. And that requires, as you note, and as I wrote in the book, an enormous amount of time with audio, video, written materials, so that what you're doing is genuinely authentic. In other words, you're not just making it up, of course. You really want to present it the way you might reasonably forecast that the opposing candidate himself or herself will present it.
Yeah, and I know in the past, not only with the current president, but with other opponents, the former president has made it personal. Back in 2020, he talked about Hunter Biden, for example, during those debates. How do you prepare the president? How do you prepare any candidate to take those personal insults? I remember even in the book you wrote, you needed to become comfortable with heaving insults at Joe Biden. That can't be easy to do when you're preparing somebody who, is in essence your client, and often somebody in a position of great power.
It's not easy. It's not comfortable, of course. But on the other hand, it's the job. I mean, you're not preparing the candidate unless, again, you're trying to do the best you can to create an example, sort of some kind of real experience of what that debate is going to be like. And if, in fact, the opposing candidate is a sharp attacker, a demagogue, whatever it may be, however personal the attacks are, however, by the way, fact-free the arguments or the attacks are, that is something that you are required to try to put before the candidate you're trying to help in the form in which you expect him to experience it.
I know, or there have been reports from CBS and others that you are involved in this round of debate prep. Is there anything you can say, anything you're comfortable sharing about how it's going?
I can't speak to this year's debate prep. I'm happy to talk about 2020 and the story in the book and the book as a whole, but I can't speak to this debate prep.
Well, you ended up in the pool, right? Didn't you accidentally during that preparation?
In 2020, I did. During a break, I was playing ball with the president's dog, Major, and my attempt to throw it the farthest possible distance to the dog's satisfaction launched me into the swimming pool up to my waist. So it was an entertaining moment in retrospect, an awkward moment at the time.
One of the other things you did on behalf of Democrats back in the day is serve on a committee that recommended a series of changes to the presidential debate process and format. You talked about increasing chances for the candidates to engage directly with each other, or to end the sort of gaming of time-limited answers and instead allow them sort of a chess clock model where they have a total amount of time to use over the course of the thing however they see fit. Based on what you know about what's coming on Thursday night, does that get you closer to the preferred mode of debate that you and your colleagues had pushed for about 10 years ago?
Yes, it comes closer for sure. It is more like the Kennedy-Nixon debates, candidates side by side, no audience, no theatrics, no entertainment tents, beer tents outside the hall, no tickets that are hard to come by. It's for the voters. And the voters are in the same position as everybody else, and the candidates are put in the most serious possible position for laying out the arguments that they want to make, the vision that they want to offer. And that's really what this is about. In the chapter in which I discuss debates, I talk generally about lying in politics, the manipulation of voters, the deficiencies in our campaign discourse. Debates are an important corrective to that, provided that they're structured in a way that are serious, in a way that's serious and respectful of the voters. And I do think the current format is an advance over what we have seen in prior cycles with these large theatrical productions.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing how it goes. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, because you're a former White House counsel, and when you're White House counsel, you're serving as attorney to the presidency, right? The institution.
That's correct.
What do you expect from the impending Supreme Court decision on Donald Trump's presidential immunity, and how do you think the 9 should rule?
Well, I'm not in a position to speak to what my own personal opinion is. I don't want to confuse people into thinking I'm speaking for the administration, for a client, or anything like that. But I can say that if you listen to the oral argument for a 2-hour span, all of the significant issues were raised and taken and debated actually quite seriously on the government's part, through the skilled advocate that they put forward, through the questions that the justices themselves asked. I would expect a decision that is going to be necessarily, because of the subject matter, controversial, and it may be, quite complicated, particularly in the view of people who see it as an either-or proposition, either immunity or no immunity. It may not, in fact, follow that particular binary course.
It sounds like you're sympathetic to the idea that it is going to be complicated, because the issue of what is an official act and what isn't is a complicated one for lawyers like you to sort out.
It could turn out, and the court has not spoken to this issue and will for the very first time, and a number of the justices made it clear that they understood the contemporary context in which this case is being brought. They certainly understand its implications for the moment, but they also see it as a ruling with far-reaching implications for the presidency, and I think took the case up very much with that kind of, if you will, mood or perspective in mind.
Yeah. Well, Bob Bauer, we thank you for joining us during what I know is a busy week. The book is The Unraveling: Reflections on Politics Without Ethics and Democracy in Crisis. I like its size and the fact that it's succinct. It's a good sort of political beach read for people who are looking for one this summer. Thank you for joining us to talk about it. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
President Biden is condemning the violence outside a synagogue in Los Angeles over the weekend. Fighting broke out between pro-Palestinian demonstrators and counter-protesters outside the Adass Torah synagogue on Sunday. Police were called in to break it up. The president said intimidating Jewish congregants is, quote, anti-Semitic and un-American. And as we mentioned, the president's at Camp David preparing for Thursday's debate, but his campaign's already in the city where it's happening, the Big Peach. Biden's political allies are working to drum up support for the president before the big showdown down in Georgia. You're streaming America Decides. The Biden campaign's working to boost support for the president just days before he arrives in Atlanta for the first presidential debate. Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff and the Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens held an event today with small business owners to highlight the president's economic record. He will go head-to-head, in case you hadn't heard, against former President Donald Trump at CNN's studios there in Atlanta on Thursday. Aaron Navarro is also and already there. Good to see you, sir. Tell us more about today's event and what Biden's campaign's hoping to achieve by holding this kind of gathering.
Hello, Ed, from the She Salon here in Atlanta, where the Biden campaign held that event that you talked about with Senator Ossoff and Mayor Dickens of Atlanta. And this was essentially a launch of a small business coalitions for Biden-Harris. And the speakers really laid into the contrast between Biden and Trump when it comes to initiatives for small businesses. Senator Ossoff talked a lot about the infrastructure bill, a couple digs here and there at Trump, often touting Infrastructure Week, but in his words, not getting anything done about it. But it's just the latest day in these pre-debate messaging for the Biden campaign. Yesterday was the Dobbs anniversary. We saw a lot of activity from Vice President Harris, the second gentleman, in the battleground states on the topic of abortion. And tomorrow we're expecting a presser about political violence and tying Trump again to January 6th and being a threat to democracy, something we can expect to see Biden at least talk about a little bit on Thursday's debate.
As you know, there's new CBS News polling that shows the economy and inflation are the top two factors influencing voters in the 2024 election, and that Donald Trump is the preferred choice among voters that rank those as their top two concerns. Does the Biden team really think events like this can change people's perceptions of how the president's handling the economy?
Well, from covering the Biden campaign at the start of the year, the one thing I was hearing when I brought up some of his lower marks on the economy is that they need to get the message out there. The Biden campaign needs to inform people about what they've done, and at least that's what they're trying to do here with the small business coalitions. Now, this was an event organized by the Biden campaign, invited other business owners, so it wasn't a massive crowd, but they're at least hoping to get some of the initiatives that they've done for small businesses across, highlighting again the Infrastructure Act and some of the COVID relief that Biden has done during his tenure as president. We'll see if it makes a dent in some of the polling.
And the debate happening there in Atlanta just 2 days from today, the significance of it being held in a battleground state. That must be one of the reasons why the Biden and Trump camps were so willing to do it, right?
I'm sure that's why they're here early to brace the Atlanta heat, because as much time as they can spend in Georgia could help them in the long run. Georgia is part of those Sun Belt states, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, if you want to throw in North Carolina in there. These battleground states where at least consistently in polling, President Biden has seen his numbers slip. As much time as they can spend here in Atlanta, I'm sure both campaigns will welcome going into November.
Yeah, well, hey, maybe while you're there, you can get a fade, since you're there at a hair salon. You got pretty good hair, though.
Maybe.
Pretty good hair, pretty good reporter he is. Aaron Navarro, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Now, here's a clue. The longest-serving host of Jeopardy. If your instinct is to answer who is Alex Trebek, then you may be the audience for the Postal Service's newest postage stamp. Coincides with the game show's 60th anniversary and pays tribute to Trebek's death in 2020. It incorporates the signature blue and white color scheme and a clue about Trebek's tenure. His name is written in question form on the opposite side. They are available to pre-order now. The official release date is July 22nd. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.